I am going to tell you the story of a helpless girl, a story that carries a very deep moral lesson for parents and children about truth, justice, patience, sacrifice, accountability, and the hidden weight some people carry their entire lives without recognition. This is the story of Teresa Lewis, a woman who lived most of her life in emotional silence, slowly erased from her own family's narrative, while another version of her life was loudly displayed to the world as if she never truly existed in it. At her father's funeral, in front of hundreds of people, cameras, reporters, and a grieving audience, her own mother stood up and declared another daughter, Heather, as the real hero, the only caregiver, the only one who sacrificed everything, the only one who stayed by his side until the end. The crowd clapped, people cried, emotional music played, and the moment felt powerful, but beneath that emotional surface was a truth no one in that room fully understood at that time. Teresa had spent her entire life in the background of her own family. From childhood, she was never fully seen or fully valued. One daughter was constantly praised, highlighted, and celebrated, while the other was quietly ignored, emotionally sidelined, and treated as if her presence was less important. But what makes Teresa's story different is not anger or rebellion, it is silence and endurance. She never grew up with hatred. Instead, she learned patience in its purest form. She learned how to stay strong without being acknowledged, how to continue giving without expecting anything back, and how to live with emotional imbalance without breaking down in public. This shaped her personality into someone who carried pain quietly and responsibility consistently. When life brought its hardest test, her father was diagnosed with a terminal illness. Doctors explained clearly that time was limited, treatment was expensive, and survival was uncertain. In that moment, life stopped being ordinary and became a test of character, sacrifice, and sincerity. Teresa did not ask who would help her, she did not wait for someone else to step forward, and she did not calculate what she would lose or gain. She simply acted. She sold her car, used her savings, took loans, worked 2 jobs, and began traveling long exhausting hours every week just to sit beside her father in hospital rooms filled with machines, fear, and uncertainty. These were not easy journeys. They were physically draining, emotionally heavy, and financially devastating. Yet she continued them repeatedly, because for her, responsibility was not a choice, it was a duty. She never posted about it, never recorded it, never asked for validation, and never tried to prove anything to anyone. She simply showed up, again and again, in silence, even when no one noticed. Meanwhile, another version of the story was slowly being constructed elsewhere. Without her knowledge, conversations were happening, narratives were being shaped, and emotional storytelling was being prepared for public attention. A book deal started forming, media interest increased, and gradually a different version of reality began to take shape. In this version, the daughter who visited only a few times was becoming the central figure, the sole caregiver, the emotional pillar of the entire struggle. She was being described as the one who sacrificed everything, the one who never left his side, the one who carried the entire burden alone. This is where reality and perception begin to separate, because when a story is repeated enough times, people stop asking whether it is true or not. But in Islamic understanding, truth is never dependent on how loudly it is told or how widely it is believed. Truth remains truth even if it is hidden. Allah sees every intention, every effort, every sacrifice, every tear shed in private, and every injustice that human beings ignore. Nothing is forgotten. Nothing is wasted. Nothing disappears. When the father's final days arrived, something unexpected happened that changed the entire direction of the story. Knowing that his time was near, and understanding that narratives were being shaped without truth, he decided to record a message. This was not done for fame, not for attention, and not for revenge. It was done for justice, clarity, and truth. In that recording, he clearly explained who had actually been present throughout his illness, who had carried the emotional, physical, and financial burden, and who had only appeared occasionally for appearances and emotional display. He explained that family is not defined by blood alone, but by love, sacrifice, consistency, and sincerity of action. When truth finally comes from someone who has lived through the entire experience, it carries a weight that no argument or denial can survive. At the funeral, when this recording was played, everything changed instantly. The emotional atmosphere collapsed, applause stopped, and silence filled the entire room. People who had believed one version of the story were suddenly forced to face another reality. Illusions that had been built over time broke within minutes. The daughter, who had been ignored for years, was finally revealed not through her own words, but through undeniable truth spoken by her father. She was not exposed as someone demanding recognition, but as someone who had carried everything without ever asking for credit. The false narrative collapsed completely because lies can survive emotion, but they cannot survive truth when it is fully revealed. From an Islamic moral perspective, this entire story carries several deep and powerful lessons. First, parents must always maintain absolute justice and fairness between children, because favoritism, even unintentional, creates emotional wounds that can last a lifetime. Second, children should serve their parents sincerely and quietly, without expecting praise, recognition, or reward from people, because true reward comes only from Allah, who sees what no human eye sees. Third, no act of sincerity is ever wasted, even if it remains invisible in this world, because Allah records every intention and every effort with perfect justice. Fourth, injustice in this world may exist temporarily, but ultimate accountability always belongs to Allah, who delays nothing and forgets nothing. And fifth, silence is not weakness, sometimes silence is patience, and patience is one of the highest spiritual strengths a person can carry. This story also forces deep reflection for every person who hears it. Do we truly recognize and appreciate those who silently sacrifice for us, or do we only believe stories that are loudly told and emotionally presented? Do we treat every person in our family with fairness, or do we unknowingly create emotional injustice through favoritism? Do we value truth itself, or do we become influenced by appearances, emotions, and public perception? And perhaps the most important question of all: if every hidden action of ours were suddenly revealed without context or protection, would we still be confident in our character? The advice from this story is simple but extremely powerful. To parents, treat every child with equal love, respect, and justice, because injustice destroys hearts even when it is unintentional. To children, serve your parents with sincerity, patience, and humility, not for recognition, because your real reward is not from people but from Allah. To everyone, never erase, distort, or take credit for someone else's effort, because truth may be delayed, but it always returns at the right time in ways no one can control. In the end, this story is not only about betrayal or justice, it is about sincerity, accountability, and divine awareness. Because in the end, people may forget what you did, people may misrepresent your story, but Allah never forgets even the smallest act of truth, patience, and sacrifice.